Rain was falling hard that Tuesday morning when Zara stepped off the campus shuttle. She pulled her hood up and looked around at the students rushing to their classes. Everything seemed so normal, so peaceful. Nobody had any idea that someone from another world was now walking among them. Zara had been planning this moment for months. Back on her home planet, she had studied every detail about Earth and its people. She knew their customs, their language, and most importantly, she knew about Dr. David Chen, the man she was here to find. David was a physics professor at the university. He spent his days working on something called quantum research, trying to understand how energy moves through space. What he didn't know was that his work was getting too close to secrets that could expose her people to the entire universe. The Villari had been watching Earth for hundreds of years, but they always stayed hidden. They were advanced beings who could travel between dimensions, but they never wanted humans to know they existed. David's research was changing that. If he continued his work, he might accidentally discover how to detect interdimensional travel. That would put her entire species at risk. So here she was, pretending to be a graduate student named Zara Thorne. She had created a perfect background story complete with fake documents and references. To everyone else, she was just another smart student who wanted to study advanced physics. Walking across campus, Zara noticed how different everything felt from her home world. The air smelled like wet grass and coffee from the nearby cafe. Students laughed and talked loudly as they walked past on her planet. Everything was quiet and orderly. People didn't show emotions the way humans did. She found the physics building and took a deep breath. Time to meet her target. The elevator took her to the third floor, where Dr. Chen's office was located. She knocked on the door and heard a voice say, "Come in." When she opened the door, she saw a man in his early 40s sitting behind a desk covered with papers and books. He looked up and smiled warmly. "You must be the new graduate student," he said, standing up to shake her hand. "I'm Dr. Chen, but please call me David. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Zara was surprised by his friendliness based on her research. She had expected someone more serious and cold. Instead, David seemed genuinely happy to meet her. His handshake was firm but gentle, and his eyes showed real interest in getting to know her. "Thank you for accepting me into your program," she said, sitting down in the chair across from his desk. "I'm very excited to learn about your research." David's face lit up. "Quantum physics is fascinating stuff. Most people think it's too complicated, but I believe it holds the key to solving some of humanity's biggest problems. Are you familiar with energy transportation theory?" As he began explaining his work, Zara realized he wasn't just showing off his knowledge. He was genuinely passionate about using science to help people. He talked about how his research could lead to clean energy that would end pollution and poverty. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Zara found herself actually interested in what he was saying. Over the next few weeks, Zara settled into her new life as a graduate student. She attended classes, worked in the lab, and spent hours discussing theories with David. Her alien knowledge made it easy for her to understand complex concepts that other students struggled with. David was impressed by her quick learning and soon began treating her like a colleague, rather than just a student. What Zara didn't expect was how much she would enjoy these conversations. David had a way of making even the most difficult subjects seem exciting. He would get so animated while explaining something that he would start drawing diagrams in the air with his hands. Sometimes he would tell terrible science jokes that were so bad they were actually funny. She also began to notice things about David that her research hadn't revealed. He worked late into the night, not because he was obsessed with fame or money, but because he truly believed his work could make the world better. He kept a small photo on his desk of children from around the world, reminding him why he was doing this research. One evening, as they were working late in the lab, David looked up from his computer screen and said, "You know, Zara, I've been doing this work for years, and most people think I'm crazy. They say my theories are too ambitious. But talking with you gives me hope that maybe I'm on the right track." Zara felt something strange happen inside her chest. It was like a warm feeling spreading through her body. She had never experienced anything like it before. On her planet, Emotions were considered a weakness, something to be controlled and suppressed. Your work is important, she found herself saying. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. David smiled and went back to his calculations. Zara stared at her own reflection in the dark window, wondering what was happening to her. She had been trained to complete her mission without getting emotionally involved. But somehow, this human was making her feel things she had never felt before. As the weeks passed, Zara found excuses to spend more time with David. She would bring him coffee when he worked late, help him organize his research papers, and listen to his theories about the universe. She told herself she was just gathering information for her mission, but deep down, she knew something was changing. The problem was that the more time she spent with David, the harder it became to imagine carrying out her orders. He wasn't the cold, ambitious scientist her superiors had described. He was kind, funny, and genuinely cared about helping others. He treated her with respect and seemed to value her opinions. One night, as Zara was walking back to her apartment, she received an encrypted message on her special communication device. It was from her handler back home. The message was short and direct. Mission parameters have changed. Target must be eliminated within 72 hours. Confirm receipt. Zara stared at the message for a long time. 72 hours. 3 days to end the life of someone who had become more than just a target. Someone who had somehow started to feel like a friend. She looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, her people were waiting for her to complete her mission. But for the first time since arriving on Earth, she wasn't sure she could do it. Something had changed inside her, and she wasn't sure she could change it back. The next morning, David greeted her with his usual warm smile and a cup of coffee. Good morning, Zara. Ready for another day of unlocking the secrets of the universe? As she took the coffee and smiled back, Zara realized that her biggest challenge wasn't going to be completing her mission. It was going to be figuring out what she had become and whether she could live with what she was supposed to do. Zara couldn't sleep that night. She kept staring at the ceiling, thinking about the message she had received. 72 hours. The words kept repeating in her mind like a broken record. She had been trained for this moment her entire life. But now that it was here, everything felt wrong. The next morning, she arrived at the lab early. David was already there, working on his computer with a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold hours ago. He looked up when she walked in and gave her that same warm smile that was becoming harder and harder to ignore. You're here early, he said, stretching his arms above his head. Couldn't sleep either? Something like that, Zara replied, sitting her bag down on the desk. She had brought her special equipment with her today, hidden in a secret compartment, tools that could end David's life quickly and quietly. But looking at him now, she felt sick to her stomach. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, David continued, turning back to his screen. About the energy patterns we discussed. I think you might be onto something revolutionary. Zara had shared some knowledge from her homeworld. Without realizing it, her people's understanding of energy was far more advanced than anything humans had discovered. She had been trying to subtly guide David away from dangerous discoveries, but instead, she had accidentally helped him make a breakthrough. As the morning went on, Zara found herself making excuses to delay her mission. When David went to get lunch, she told herself she would act then. But when he returned with an extra sandwich for her, saying he thought she might be hungry, she couldn't do it. You didn't have to do that, she said, unwrapping the sandwich. No, David replied, sitting down across from her. But I wanted to. You've been such a great help to me these past few weeks. I don't think I tell you enough how much I appreciate having you here. That strange warm feeling in her chest returned, stronger than before. Zara had never experienced gratitude before. Not like this. On her planet, relationships were based on duty and function. People worked together because they had to, not because they wanted to. David, she said slowly, what if someone told you that your research was dangerous? That it could hurt people? David paused, his sandwich halfway to his mouth. I'd want to know why they thought that. Everything I do is aimed at helping people. If someone could show me how my work might cause harm, I'd change it immediately. Even if it meant giving up years of research, absolutely, David said without hesitation. Science should serve humanity, not the other way around. If my work could hurt people, then it's not worth doing. Zara felt something break inside her chest. This man, this human who was supposed to be her enemy, was willing to sacrifice everything he had worked for just to avoid hurting others. How could someone like that be a threat to anyone? That afternoon, David had to attend a faculty meeting. Zara decided this would be the perfect time to complete her mission. She could make it look like an accident, and no one would suspect anything. She followed him to the administration building, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with nervousness about the mission. David walked into the meeting room, and Zara positioned herself in the hallway. She could phase through the wall and be done with this in seconds. But as she prepared to use her abilities, something unexpected happened. The building's security system activated. Someone had triggered an alarm, and suddenly the hallway was filled with campus security guards. David, hearing the commotion, came out of the meeting room to see what was happening. "What's going on?" he asked one of the guards. "False alarm, sir. Someone probably bumped into a sensor. We're just doing a quick check of the building." Zara had to abort her mission. She slipped away before anyone noticed her. But as she walked back to her apartment, she realized something disturbing. She felt relieved. Part of her was actually glad that the security alarm had stopped her from completing her mission. That night, Zara experienced something she had never felt before. She had a dream, but it wasn't like the organized thought processes or people experience during rest. This was chaotic, emotional, and terrifying. In the dream, she carried out her mission. She saw David fall, saw the life leave his eyes, saw his research papers scattered across the floor. But worst of all, she saw herself standing over him, feeling nothing. The dream version of herself was cold and empty, just like she was supposed to be. She woke up in a cold sweat, her heart racing. The dream had felt so real, so horrible. For the first time in her life, Zara understood what humans meant when they talked about nightmares. The next day, David noticed that something was wrong. "You look tired," he said, concerned. "Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine," Zara lied, but she wasn't fine. She was changing, becoming something her people had never intended her to be. She was becoming human, you know, David said, settling into his chair. "I've been meaning to ask you something. How do you always seem to know exactly what I need? Yesterday you brought me coffee right when I was getting a headache. Last week, you found that research paper I needed before I even mentioned it. It's like you can read my mind." Zara's blood ran cold. She had been using her enhanced senses without thinking about it. She could hear David's heart rate increase when he was stressed, could smell the chemical changes in his body when he was tired, could predict his needs based on subtle changes in his behavior. "That no human would notice? I just pay attention," she said carefully. "It's more than that," David continued, but he was smiling. "Sometimes I joke to myself that you must be from another planet or something. You understand things that take other people years to learn." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Zara. If only he knew how close to the truth he was. That evening, as they worked late in the lab again, David started talking about his childhood. He told her about growing up poor, about how his parents had sacrificed everything so he could get an education. He talked about the day he decided to become a scientist, how he wanted to make sure no other children had to go hungry because their families couldn't afford basic necessities. "That's why this research is so important to me," he said, looking at the equations on his whiteboard. "If I can solve the energy crisis, I can help millions of people, maybe billions." Zara felt tears forming in her eyes. She had never cried before, didn't even know she was capable of it. But sitting there, listening to David talk about his dreams of helping others, she felt something breaking inside her. "David," she said quietly, "what if I told you that you might be in danger? That someone might want to stop your research?" David turned to look at her, his expression suddenly serious. "Is that what this is about? Have you been worried about me?" Zara didn't know how to answer. How could she explain that she was the danger, that she had been sent to eliminate him, but was now more concerned about protecting him than completing her mission? Zara, David said gently, if someone is threatening you, or if you're in some kind of trouble, you can tell me. I want to help. The kindness in his voice was almost too much to bear. Here was a man who thought she was in danger, and his first instinct was to protect her. He had no idea that she was the one who posed a threat to him. I have to go, Zara said suddenly, gathering her things. She couldn't stay there any longer. Not when David was looking at her with such concern and trust. Wait, David called after her, but she was already heading for the door. As she walked home through the dark campus, Zara realized that her mission had become impossible. She couldn't eliminate David, not anymore, but she also couldn't ignore her orders. Her superiors would be expecting a report soon, and she had no idea what she was going to tell them for the first time since arriving on Earth. Zara felt truly alone. She was caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. She was no longer the perfect assassin her people had created, but she wasn't human either. She was something new, something unexpected, and she had less than 24 hours to figure out what that meant. Zara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw David's face, full of trust and concern. The deadline was now less than 18 hours away, and she still couldn't bring herself to complete her mission. Something had to give. The next morning, she arrived at the lab to find David already there, but he looked different, tired, worried. He glanced up when she walked in, and for the first time since she'd known him, his smile seemed forced. Good morning, he said quietly, not meeting her eyes directly. David, what's wrong? Zara asked. Setting her bag down, she could sense his distress even without using her enhanced abilities. His body language was tense, his movements careful. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, David replied, finally looking at her. About me being in danger. I stayed up all night trying to figure out what you meant. Zara's heart sank. She had said too much, revealed too much of her concern. I was probably just being paranoid, she said, trying to sound casual. No, I don't think so, David said, standing up and walking over to her. Zara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you really who you say you are? The question hit her like a physical blow. Zara stared at him, her mind racing. How much did he suspect? How much did he know? What do you mean? She asked, though. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. David pulled out a folder and opened it on the desk between them. Inside were printouts of research papers, university records, and what looked like background checks. I couldn't sleep, so I started looking into your academic background, he said gently. Your references check out. Your grades are perfect. But there's something strange about your knowledge. You understand concepts that even graduate students with years of experience struggle with. You know things that haven't been published yet. Zara felt the walls closing in around her. I've always been a fast learner, she said weakly. It's more than that, David continued. Yesterday, when you asked me about my research being dangerous, you sounded like you knew something specific, like you had information I didn't, and then there are all the little things. The way you always know exactly what I need. The way you seem to predict problems before they happen. He paused, studying her face carefully. Zara, I'm a scientist. I believe in facts and evidence. But I also believe in trusting my instincts. And my instincts tell me that you're not just a graduate student who happened to end up in my lab. Zara felt tears forming in her eyes again. The human emotions that had been growing strong every day were now threatening to overwhelm her completely. She had two choices: lie and try to maintain her cover, or tell David the truth and risk everything. Looking at his face, seeing the genuine concern and care in his eyes, she knew she couldn't lie to him anymore. You're right, she whispered. I'm not who you think I am. David's expression didn't change. He didn't look shocked or afraid. He just nodded slowly and said, Tell me who you really are. Zara took a deep breath. Once she said this, there would be no going back. I'm not from Earth, David. I'm from another world, another dimension. My people are called the Velari, and I was sent here to stop your research." She expected him to laugh, to think she was having some kind of breakdown. Instead, David sat down heavily in his chair and ran his hands through his hair. "I was hoping. I was wrong," he said quietly, "but deep down, I think I knew. The way you understand quantum physics, the way you seem to know things that no human should know. It all makes sense now." "You believe me?" Zara asked, surprised. "I'm a scientist, Zara. When faced with evidence that challenges my understanding of the world, I have to consider all possibilities, and honestly, after working with you these past weeks, the idea that you're from another world is the only explanation that fits all the facts." Zara felt a mixture of relief and terror. "David, you need to understand something. I wasn't sent here to study with you. I was sent here to eliminate you." Now David's expression did change, not to fear, but to sadness. "Because of my research? Your work is getting too close to discovering interdimensional travel," Zara explained. "My people have been hidden from humanity for centuries. If your research continues, it could expose us to your entire species. My superiors see that as a threat that must be stopped, and they sent you to stop me," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Zara replied, unable to meet his eyes. "I'm what you would call an assassin. I was trained from birth to complete missions like this without hesitation, without emotion. But something changed," David said. It wasn't a question. Zara looked up at him, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "You changed everything. I was supposed to be incapable of feeling what humans call love, but spending time with you, seeing your kindness, your passion for helping others, it changed me somehow." "You fell in love with me," David said softly. "I don't even know if that's the right word for what I'm feeling," Zara admitted. "My people don't have concepts for these emotions. All I know is that I can't complete my mission." "I can't hurt you." David stood up and walked around the desk to where she was sitting. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and took her hands in his. "Zara, I need you to know something. I forgive you." "How can you forgive me?" she asked, looking up at him through her tears. "I came here to end your life, because you didn't." David said simply, "You had every opportunity, but you chose not to. You chose to protect me instead of following your orders. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. But my people will send others," Zara said desperately. "When they realize I've failed, they'll send more operatives. Your life is still in danger." "Then we'll figure out a solution together," David said firmly. "Maybe there's a way to modify my research so it doesn't threaten your people. Maybe there's a way to satisfy both sides. You would do that. You would change your life's work, Zara. My research is about helping people. If it's going to hurt an entire species, then it's not worth pursuing. We'll find another way." "It's not that simple," Zara said, shaking her head. "My superiors won't trust any compromise. They see your entire species as a potential threat. Then we'll have to convince them otherwise," David said. "But we'll do it together. I'm not going to let them hurt you for choosing to follow your heart." For the first time since arriving on Earth, Zara felt something she had never experienced before. Hope, not the cold calculation of mission success that her people valued, but the warm, glowing feeling that maybe, somehow, everything would work out. "David, there's something else you need to know," she said. "I'm not the only one. There are other Valari operatives on Earth, and they're probably already suspicious about why I haven't completed my mission." "How long do we have?" David asked. "Not long," Zara replied. "Maybe hours. They'll come looking for me, and when they find us together, then we better start working on a solution right now," David said, moving toward his computer. "Tell me everything about your people, their technology, their concerns, their fears. If we're going to prevent a war between our species, we need to understand each other." As Zara began explaining the complex history of her people, she realized that this was the first time in her life she had ever felt truly hopeful about the future. She had found something worth fighting for, something worth risking everything to protect. But she also knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Her people would not give up easily, and David's life was still in terrible danger. The love she felt for him had saved his life, but it might also be the thing that destroyed them both. 3 days had passed since Zara revealed her true identity to David, and they had barely left the lab. They worked together frantically, trying to find a solution that could save both their species from conflict. David had modified his research, removing the dangerous elements that could expose the Velari, while still keeping the parts that could help humanity. But their time was running out. Zara felt them before she saw them. Her enhanced senses picked up the familiar energy signatures of her own people. 3 Velari operatives had arrived on campus, and they were looking for her. "David, we have to go," she said, quickly shutting down his computer. "They're here." "Who's here?" David asked, but he was already moving, trusting her instincts completely. "My people. They've come to finish what I couldn't." They grabbed the most important research files and headed for the back exit of the building. As they stepped outside, Zara saw a figure standing in the shadows near the parking lot. Tall, dressed in dark clothes, with the same pale skin and sharp features that marked all Velari. "Zara," the figure called out, stepping into the light. It was Kale, her former partner and the most skilled operative their people had ever trained. "Hello, Kale," Zara replied, positioning herself between him and David. "You've disappointed many people back home," Kale said, his voice cold and emotionless in the way Zara remembered from her old life. "The council expected this mission to be completed weeks ago." "Plans change," Zara said simply. Kale's eyes shifted to David, studying him like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "So this is the human that broke our perfect weapon. You don't look like much." "Leave him out of this," Zara said, her voice carrying a warning that surprised even her. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Kale replied. "My orders are clear. Both the target and the compromised operative must be eliminated." David stepped forward, despite Zara's attempt to keep him behind her. "If you're here because of the research, you should know that I've already modified it. It no longer poses any threat to your people." Kale laughed, a sound completely devoid of warmth. "You think this is about your little experiments? This is about contamination. Zara has been infected with human emotions, and that infection cannot be allowed to spread." "Infected?" David asked, looking at Zara with confusion. "My people believe that emotions make us weak," Zara explained. "They think what I'm feeling for you is a disease that needs to be cured or eliminated." Kale added, "The council has decided that any Velari showing signs of emotional development must be destroyed before they can contaminate others." As they talked, Zara noticed something that made her blood run cold. Kale wasn't alone. She could sense at least 2 other operatives moving through the shadows around them. They were being surrounded. "David," she whispered, "when I say run, you need to get to your car and drive as far away from here as possible." "I'm not leaving you," David whispered back. "You have to. This is what I was trained for. Let me protect you." Before David could argue, Kale made his move. He lunged forward with inhuman speed, but Zara was ready. She met his attack, and for a moment, they fought like dancers performing a deadly ballet. Their movements were too fast for David's eyes to follow clearly, but Zara was holding back. The emotions she had developed were making her hesitate, making her want to find solutions that didn't involve hurting others. Kale had no such limitations. "You've become weak," Kale said as they circled each other. "The human emotions have poisoned your mind." "No," Zara replied, dodging another attack. "They've made me stronger. They've made me care about something bigger than just following orders." The fight continued, but Zara knew she was losing. Her abilities were fading as her body continued to change, becoming more human every day. What had once felt like a curse was now revealed to be part of a larger transformation run. She shouted to David, using the last of her enhanced strength to create an opening. David hesitated for a moment, then sprinted toward the parking lot. But as he ran, one of the other operatives stepped out to block his path. This one was smaller than Kale, but moved with the same deadly precision. Something inside Zara snapped. Seeing David in danger triggered a response she didn't know she was capable of. Energy surged through her body, not the cold power of original abilities, but something warm and fierce and protective. She reached the operative, blocking David's path in an instant, moving faster than she ever had before. But instead of the calculated strikes she had been trained to use, her attacks were driven by pure emotion, love, rage, desperation to protect the person who had changed her entire world. The operative fell, unconscious but alive. Zara found herself surprised that she hadn't wanted to kill, even to protect David. Her humanity was now stronger than her original programming. Impossible, Kale said, staring at her with something that might have been amazement. Your power levels are higher than before, not lower. I don't understand it either. Zara admitted, breathing hard. But I know that everything you believe about emotions making us weak is wrong. More operatives emerged from the shadows. It seemed like the entire Valari strike force had come to Earth to deal with what they saw as a contamination problem. There are too many of them, David said, reaching Zara's side despite her earlier order to run. I told you to get out of here, Zara said, but she was secretly relieved that he had stayed. We're in this together, remember? David replied, taking her hand. The moment their hands touched, something extraordinary happened. The other operatives who had been approaching them suddenly stopped. One of them, a young female, dropped her weapon and stared at them with wide eyes. What is that feeling? The female operative asked, her voice full of wonder instead of the usual Valari monotone. I can feel it too, said another operative. It's like warmth spreading through my mind. Kale backed away from them, his expression shifting from confidence to fear. Stay away from them. The contamination is spreading. But it was too late. The emotion that Zara and David shared was somehow affecting the other Valari. One by one, they began to experience feelings they had never known before. Confusion gave way to curiosity, and curiosity gave way to something that looked like joy. This is what they were so afraid of. Zara realized, not that I would fail in my mission, but that other Valari would see what I had found and want it for themselves. The young female operative who had dropped her weapon walked closer to them, her steps uncertain but determined. Is this what humans call happiness? She asked. Part of it, David said gently. There's so much more to experience. The council lied to us, another operative said, his voice full of anger and wonder. They told us emotions were weakness, but this feels like strength. Kale was now completely alone, his team transformed by their exposure to the love between Zara and David. This ends now, he said, pulling out a device that Zara recognized with horror. David, get back, she shouted. That's a dimensional disruptor. It can tear apart the fabric of space itself. But before Kale could activate the device, something unexpected happened. A new voice spoke from behind them, calm and authoritative. Stand down, Kale. That's an order. They turned to see an elderly Valari woman approaching them. She wore the robes of the High Council, and even Kale seemed shocked by her presence. Council. Mem Rivera, Kale said, lowering his weapon. What are you doing here? I came to see for myself what was happening to our people, Vera replied. And what I see is not contamination. What I see is evolution. She walked over to where Zara and David stood. Studying them both carefully, you've discovered something that we thought was lost to our species long ago. The ability to grow, to change, to become more than what we were. The Council will never accept this, Kale said desperately. The Council is changing too, Vera replied. There are others like Zara back home, operatives who have been on long-term assignments and have begun to develop emotional capabilities. We can no longer ignore what this means. What does it mean? Zara asked. It means, Vera said with something that might have been a smile, that your weakness has become our greatest strength. And it's time for both our species to learn what that means.